Hey guys, welcome to the Markcast. Reed here. Well, here we go. Teased all week, big time guest, big time interview. Hope you guys feel like I delivered today. Former XFL 2020 Commissioner Oliver Luck, as well as many other accolades. Long form, deep dive interview today, over 50 plus minutes with the former Spring League Commissioner, getting his thoughts on the new UFL merger, spring football landscape right now, the future of spring football, everything else. Super insightful interview. Hope you guys enjoy it. Like I said, a long time with Oliver Luck, sitting down and spending his Saturday morning for us on the podcast. I hope you guys enjoy. Please like and subscribe. If you're a new viewer on here of discovering this video, please subscribe. We're trying to get over 4,000 subscribers ahead of the UFL 2025 kickoff, working on a new giveaway for that. That will be a story for another time we will get into. But if you are a returning viewer on here, maybe someone that doesn't always check out the program, maybe you don't like me, but you want to hear what Oliver Luck has to say, make sure you subscribe. Please give the video a thumbs up. Share it if you see it. Doesn't cost you a penny. A lot of work going into this and time getting this tracked down and set up. So I really hope you enjoy. Like I said, a lot of work, and Oliver is spending his Saturday morning educating us, filling us in on all of his thoughts, us as the listeners, viewers of the program. So really appreciate that. Like I said, like and subscribe. Let you get to the interview here. We will see you at the end. Thanks. Well, if you had it on my bingo card that I would be talking to Oliver Luck this week, I would not have believed you. But here we are, former commissioner, XFL 2020, and as many other accolades here, NFL Europe, everything else. Oliver Luck, sir, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm very, very happy to be in your podcast this morning.
It's good. I've been teasing a couple appearances I had this week. Big time guest. I would say top 5 we've ever had on here. We've had Randy Ambrosius of the world and everything else, but this is a big time. I mean that. Really appreciate that. We Sam Schwartzy, mutual friends, setting this up. Talking today, we're wrapping UFL 2024. I saw you in the news about some of that stuff. I thought this could be good. First off, just we're here, Saturday morning. You're drinking coffee. We're talking. How's your world? How's everything going?
My world is great. I live in Colorado. My wife and I live in Colorado, and I'm fairly busy doing a number of sort of consulting projects, traveling probably more than I really want to, but life's good. Cannot complain at all.
Well, good. So we're here, like I said, saw some of the comments that I think our listeners, as well as many people, I think, if anything, view XFL 2020 and what you guys did there with everybody from top to bottom, everybody involved. It really kind of the pinnacle. And we were talking before we recorded, save COVID probably would have been, really the high point of kind of what people expected from these leagues. Just to start out, what aspect of 2020 were you most proud of here, looking back now, 4 years later almost?
Well, I think the thing that was really most important to us as an organization, and we've focused on it, a lot, was coming out of the gate strong in the sense of good quality football. We thought that we had an opportunity, sort of coasting off of the Super Bowl. As you may remember, unlike the current UFL, we started the week after the Super Bowl, and there's still a buzz in the American football community in this country for football, because you've gone through a long college, a long NFL season that culminates in the Super Bowl, the most watched television event in the history of the world, I suppose, or at least the history of North America. And we thought there was real value in sort of gliding off of that, in the wake of the Super Bowl, kicking off the season. The critical thing, in my estimation, was we wanted to make sure we had good quality, players, games coming out of the shoot. I was at the opening game, which I think was in DC, if I remember correctly, the DC Defenders. And I'll never forget, one of our players that I was really hoping would step up and play well was Cardell Jones, the Ohio State quarterback, won the national championship with the Buckeyes. And he was, at DC. Pep Hamilton, whom I know very well, was the head coach there. And it was the first quarter. There was a play action, slow developing crossing pattern for the DC team. Cardell, play action, drops back. and there was a guy, running the sort of diagonal route, 25 yards down the field. That's a tough throw because your receiver's running away from you on a that. And I remember thinking, oh God, I hope Cardell makes this throw because the guy had a couple yards on the defender. Said, I hope he makes this throw because this is sort of what every NFL quarterback would make that throw, and he did. It was a beautiful ball caught, 28-yard pickup or whatever. But I remember thinking, okay, that's the kind of quality that this league needs coming out of the chute. And we more or less had that, right? Not every game was perfect the first 3 weeks, but I thought we had really good quarterback play, which to me is absolutely critical for the success of any league. We had good quarterback play. We had, good special teams play. People noticed those things, right? Punts, kickoffs, field goals. We had, of course, the new rules that we had put in with the kickoff, and people sort of enjoyed that. But I think I'm most proud of the work that all of our folks did. Coaches, Doug Whaley, Sam Schwartzstein, all of our staff that worked on this, Eric Elko, putting all of that together and coming out of the chute with good quality football. Were we the NFL? Of course not, right? We don't have Pat Mahomes playing or, Tom Brady or whomever, but I was very proud of that.
In another life, maybe I'll tell you, we did after the season went down and we were podcasting, we needed some content, and we ended up getting a cameo from Cardell Jones, and we ended up making a promo out of it, and got a kick out of basically sending him the request. And I think about 6 minutes later, he was in his car filming it and sending it over. So you could tell Cardell didn't have, it was everything got shut down. Side note, before I forget, thoughts on the kickoff here with the UFL not using the kickoff, the NFL thing, just while we're speaking about the XFL rules.
Yeah, I can't speak for the UFL. I wasn't involved at all with any of their discussions, so I don't know, why they decided not to do it. I thought it when we did it. I thought it was brilliant. Sam, much of this was Sam's idea. We started from a pretty basic premise and said to ourselves, let's make the kickoff more interesting because it's basically at the NFL level, at least, it's been taken out of the game, right? Every kicker can, you could put them back at the 20-yard line and they'd kick it out of the end zone, right? Yeah. They've become that good. And we thought that it was an exciting play. I had, visions in my head of, Billy White Shoes and the old Oilers running, kickoffs back. It was just an exciting play, but it had been sort of neutered, if you will, basically taken out of the game. So we decided let's play around with some thoughts about what a new kickoff could look like that would keep the kickoff in the game, but also would respect the, running full speed concussion problem. The kickoff was clearly the single most significant play in terms of concussions. So we wanted to be respectful of, what the NFL was trying to do, which we fully agree with, which was, reduce the number of, of head impacts, right? Or at least the potential for that. So I thought it was great. We had, if I remember correctly, 2 kickoffs returned for a touchdown. They were super exciting plays. There was lots of strategy being, discussed, et cetera. We only had 5 weeks of play, 5 times 4 games, 20 games we played in total. So, who knows how it would have developed further. But as you can imagine, we were all very excited, when the NFL voted, the competition committee voted to make that the new kickoff. So that was something that, we I guess can say to ourselves, hey, we made a little bit of a contribution to the game. And, it's so interesting because you can play this out looking forward. If the NFL uses it, which they will, they're going to, they've got the best athletes in the world, arguably. That'll quickly filter down, as most rule changes do, to the collegiate level, to the NCAA level. And that'll quickly filter down, to the high school level. So, we may see in whatever 5 years, 10 years, we may see pretty much everybody using the new kickoff, which I think will be a success, for the XFL, for what it's worth, but also more importantly, it'll be a really positive safety issue for the players.
100%, yeah, and hopefully that you would think that the UFL would embrace that, considering it's on from that.
Yeah, it surprised me they didn't do it, but I don't know why. I mean, that's something you'd have to ask, Daryl Johnson or whomever at the UFL made that decision.
Yeah, I did. He was on. They were blessed enough to have him on pregame.
Yeah, what did just out of curiosity, what did he say?
They wanted it to look like a more traditional kickoff, is what he said, because there was some controversy where did he say they wanted it to look like real football? It didn't want it. They didn't say real football. They meant traditional football, and so I accept that. But I think that looking
Yeah, no,
back,
I mean that's reasonable. We had, philosophically at the XFL back in 2019 when we started talking about all these things. We had a lot of discussions and brought a lot of people in. Guys like Jason Wright, the Commanders team president, who of course played, in the league, played at Northwestern. Got his. We had input from so many different people, but we always said, "Is this a gimmick?" Because if it's a gimmick, if the American public will view this as a gimmick, we don't want it. We wanted, real good old-fashioned football. But there are things that you can do that aren't gimmicky, we believed, and it really helped the game, improved the game, and the kickoff was, I think, one example, of that. So, to everybody his own. Obviously, I wasn't involved with the UFL, but it did surprised me and actually a little bit disappointed me that they didn't use that kickoff, knowing as I did, and Sam, for example, and Doug Whaley, who's over at the UFL. They also knew that the NFL was looking at it, right? It wasn't a secret or anything. There are very few secrets in the National Football League. So that kind of surprised me that they wouldn't have taken advantage of that sort of interest from the American public. Having said that, they did well, I think, with their TV numbers. So kudos to the league. I'm not being critical at all. I was just a little bit surprised they didn't follow up on that.
That's okay. No, and that's fine. It's okay to be, we get in trouble here for being too critical. So have you had any discussions at all with current management about anything?
I'm friendly with Doug Whaley, and we talk, gosh, every month or so, and just catch up on things, etc. And he'll ask me a sort of UFL football related question every now and then, but I've had very little of any interaction with their executives and their folks. I've not searched it out. They haven't, from their part, haven't searched it out. So, no harm, no foul.
That's okay. Would you ever consider a return to spring football if it arose?
Oh, I don't know. I've got a bunch of stuff that I'm doing right now that I really enjoy. And it's, as I call it, it's I don't have a W-2 job, and I like that because I can, decide more or less how I want to spend my time, where I want to spend my time, what projects, etc. And I'm doing a bunch of things with college athletics. I'm also doing a pretty significant project outside of college sports that really is all about the law. I'm a lawyer by training. And that's keeping me busy, and I find it very fascinating. Actually, more intellectually stimulating than a spring league. Not to say that spring leagues aren't fun. They are. I've been through two of them, and there is a playbook, if you will, and installing that playbook isn't really as difficult as some people make it out to be.
So like you said, rounding out the season here, good ratings, right? Championship, a little, 25-0, a little less to be desired there with that. But, it was good. We were there in St. Louis. It was fun. Something that you wish that you saw UFL doing now that XFL was doing, something that you wish they were taking advantage of?
Well, the only sort of issue that I had, I thought the quality of play was good. I'll be honest, I didn't watch all that much, I'd watch, a half an hour here, 45 minutes there, whatever. I thought one of the things that we did well, and already mentioned this, was riding in the wake of the NFL season. And I think there's sort of a psyche that the American football public has, the viewing public that enjoys football. And there's a lot of people that like football. There's no question about that. A lot of casual observers that can get pulled in as the NFL and college football has proven. I thought it made sense for us for a number of reasons, including television numbers, including sort of the ability for spring players to have a little bit of a break before they took their NFL opportunity. We believed that there was value in starting right after the NFL season was over, not just, again, to take advantage of the sort of interest level that was still fairly high, but also, to go through the 10 game regular season, the playoff, the 2 weeks of playoff, and give those players an opportunity to rest a little bit before they jump into NFL an NFL training camp. We believed we needed to make our league, in terms of players and coaches, quite honestly, but mostly players, as accessible and amenable to make that NFL transition, because our belief was every single player in the XFL 2020 wanted to make it to the NFL, right? Just like we believe when I was running NFL Europe, and of course we were owned and operated by the NFL, but we believe every single player over in Europe, even the homegrown players, right? The Germans, the Dutch, whatever, their goal was to make it to the NFL. So it was important to have a sort of a transition that made sense physically and mentally for a player who's just played a 12-game season. Keep in mind, you've got guys who've played a college season or an NFL season, and then very quickly they turn around and they're in training camp for the XFL. They played that season, and then their goal is to get to the NFL, and then boom, all of a sudden they only have a week or two off before they have to go to a training camp, and they got to absorb a whole new playbook, new terminology, blah blah blah. So we thought that starting right after the NFL season had some real benefits. I remember this distinctly. The Super Bowl prior to the XFL kickoff was down in Miami. And I went down to Radio Row, same thing I used to do with the kickoff of the NFL Europe season. Went down to Radio Row, but I could say, hey, a week after the Super Bowl, there's going to be high quality, football, American professional players, guys you've heard of, guys like Cardale Jones. There's going to be great players that have won national championships at the collegiate level starting next week. And it's going to be on broadcasters like Fox and ESPN. And we're going to have, Kurt Menefee calling these games and, some of the, right. So just like what you're seeing, quote unquote, at the Super Bowl. So we exaggerated a little bit, but there was a time proximity, to all of that. And I think that was a smart move by us, as evident by the fact that we came out of, that first 2 weeks or so with 2, 3, 4, whatever million, 3-point-something million viewers. And that was pretty good. That gave us a good jolt of energy and excitement. Of course, it didn't last very long with COVID, so week 5, everybody had to shut down. So who knows how it would have played out. But I think that was a good move that the XFL made.
Yeah, I was generally like in depression following that. It was really weird. I mean, I think everyone was really weird time, and God forbid all the men and women that got laid off and jobs and all that kind of stuff. It was just a really weird time for that. Just a side note, are you looking now and because obviously XFL with Fox and ABC and all that, seeing now the merger of everything, are you surprised that came about, that XFL and USFL weren't able to run? I mean, we've seen a lot now. Obviously, in hindsight, it makes sense that they all came together, but that maybe there's not enough demand for two competing ones right now.
Yeah, it wasn't a surprise, number one. Number two, I think there is a dearth of American men who can play quarterback at the professional level. I mean, I don't want to overblow it or, over exaggerate it, but it's a hard position to play. The college game has developed differently than the pro game. I think there's some collegiate elements that have been, adopted by the pro game, but it's still a game where you've got to, hit that diagonal, 25-yard ball, with a receiver running away from you, et cetera. That's not an easy throw to make. So I think that there's a level of interest that doesn't support two teams. I think there's a pool of players that isn't quite honestly big enough to support two teams. And keep in mind, you've got the CFL, that has some pretty damn good players in it, playing up in up north, and we often forget about that. But there's some really good talent there, and those players really weren't that interested in coming to the XFL. Vice versa, we had a little bit of interaction, but that wasn't in any form or fashion, any sort of a league where we had a strong relationship. I know Randy very well. We talked a couple of times, but it was all about sort of getting to the NFL for our players. So it made sense for a merger to take place. I think for a lot of reasons, very much like the AAF, if you remember that league, deciding, I forget, you'll know the details better than I forget the details now, but it folded after week 8.
Week 7, 8, yeah.
And that opened up at least a couple of players and some coaches, et cetera. So it probably isn't in the cards for two professional leagues that really have aspirations to be the spring league. I think it makes sense to sort of combine the resources, and that wasn't a surprise, at least to me.
In terms of selling off franchises, obviously that's been a long time goal here, a long time for this USFL, now UFL. What would it take in your mind to have someone actually come in and want to buy one of these franchises?
Well, I think it obviously takes some money, number one, and the valuations for all pro sports franchises are have just skyrocketed. I don't care if it's NFL, NBA, MLB, but even look at sort of the second tier leagues like the NWSL, the new women's soccer league, MLS. I would categorize as a major league, and MLS is doing remarkably well in its valuations. Private equity is coming in. Some of the leagues are accepting sovereign wealth fund investment. So there's lots of cash out there, which is very positive for the ultimate goal of, if that is the ultimate goal of selling these franchises off. I think though it takes a while, quite honestly, to stabilize. It's like building a new apartment complex. Somebody develops an apartment complex, before they flip it, they really have to stabilize the rent, and get up to whatever 92% occupancy and have a healthy rent, et cetera. And it probably would take, in my estimation, anywhere between 3 and 5 years to stabilize one of these franchises. St. Louis, incredible fan support. We had it right out of the gate. I think the UFL had it this past season. My buddy Anthony Beck, the head coach there, fellow West Virginia Mountaineer. Love Anthony. Love what his son is doing at Iowa State. He's my guy. But that may be stabilized already. I mean, you can count on 40,000 fans coming down to watch the team. It's an NFL style venue. The dome's getting old, but it's still a great venue to watch. Great atmosphere. Incredible, but there are other franchises that will take longer to stabilize. So, in my estimation, I've always said, and you've heard me, I think, say this many times before, spring football is, I'm very bullish on it, but it does take someone initially with some deep pockets and some staying power to really build the brand. In part because there have been so many starts and stops over the years. And so people are going to be a little bit suspicious before they invest. Now, if I think back to the XFL, St. Louis, we knocked it out of the park. Seattle was unbelievable. That sports town is incredible. And I remember thinking about, what head coach to hire out there. And I'm friends with Jim Zorn. And I thought, my gosh, if I can get Jim Zorn, he's a legend in Seattle, particularly when you go back, to the 80s and 90s. And when Jim, when I learned Jim was interested in coaching, I thought we're going to hit this out of the park. But Seattle really was DC was a great venue. Yeah. I mean, we sold out Audi Field. The atmosphere was tremendous. It was maybe the youngest of all of our audiences. If you looked around the stadium, it was incredible. It was all, 20-year-old Gen Zers or whatever. We had 3 or 4 of those franchises that were very strong coming out of the gate. There are some others that needed some time and care and attention. So I think it's going to take at least 3 to 5 years in a stabilization and some consistency where you're building off of year one. You're selling more season all the metrics, right? More season tickets, better viewership, more content on social media. You can measure all these things now very easily. But I think it'll take 3, 4, maybe 5 years to really have enough franchises, 5 or 6 out of the 8, let's say, that really have stabilized. And then there's probably plenty of money to chase those in terms of selling those to individual operators. It's a lot more work for the league. As commissioner, I had lots of authority to make decisions about football, about business side, et cetera. So it's a little bit different when you have an owner and they want to weigh in, et cetera. But that certainly is the model that the American professional sports landscape has adopted, and it's worked pretty damn well, I think, for most, if not all, the leagues.
In terms of XFL 2020, I think part of it was choosing good venues, like you said, St. Louis, DC, and I'm a Commanders fan. And now it's on the upswing with Jane Daniels and Dan Quinn and all that. But at the time it wasn't right. People in DC weren't a part of that. But then like you said, you also had Seattle, where I'm at. I thought good marketing, because I was just a fan in 2020, right? Like living through all of that and seeing that and being passionate. So now this new UFL. We're not really seeing similar results, right, outside of maybe the markets that they inherited from 2020. And now kind of seeing them want to be more seasonal, right? The head coaches are going to be laid off seasonally until the fall. Like, how do they do what you guys did, but it feels like maybe hamstringing themselves, or putting these weird limitations on, like, well, we can only market 4 months out of the year?
Yeah, I don't know the financial restrictions that the UFL is operating under. I think in a perfect world, even in a frugal spring league context where you're really turning over every penny, you need continuity with your coaches. You need at least a certain number of players that that can return to your team. 3 or 4 high profile guys. And if you need to pay them a little bit more money to come back, to resist the siren call of the National Football League. For some players, AJ McCarron's a good example. He's bounced around the NFL. He's played a little bit in the NFL and done fairly well for a backup, but he's clearly not a starter. And you got to build a franchise around a quarterback, and he's played well in the UFL. There's no question about that. So can you figure out how to provide a little bit more money for him to say, hey, we need you for the next 2 years to be the face of this franchise, and you've got to do that, across the board. It takes money, and that's why it takes deep pockets. So I don't know if you can build a spring league on the cheap, so to say, and I'm not saying that the UFL is gone cheap. I haven't followed it. And again, I don't know the financial restrictions, but there is something about, fan avidity. There is something about, having players that return that, fans recognize. And, football fans, like me, I'm a college football fan as well as an NFL fan. I recognize every quarterback in the league. I know where they went to college,
Yeah.
and I'd love to see them develop, because most of them will go to a NFL training camp or whatever number. Let's say there's 50 players in the UFL that go to an NFL training camp. Guess what? 47 of them will be, out of a job come week 1, or maybe on the practice squad, and they'll need to continue to play. So it's really being smart in terms of how you sign up players for the longer term that are going to be the face of your franchise, but also, you have to have the money to do that. And that's, I don't know the restrictions that that Daryl and his team are working under, but that's important. And I'm sure they're trying their best to develop some continuity. But that's one of the reasons why I've always said a spring league really does need some deep pockets in years 1, 2, 3, and 4 before things begin to stabilize. Because you're not going to make any money year 1, nor are you going to make any money year 2, nor are you going to make money year 3, nor are you going to make money in year 4. Maybe year 5 you begin to have a plus minus zero. But it takes a while. It's like any other long-term investment. It's gonna take a while before you reach that that plus minus 0 point.
In terms of the seasonality of coaches, and they're going to be, we're doing showcases. They'll pay them seasonally to come in, kind of like appearance fees and all that. But are you concerned with that, with roster building, of having the coaches only kind of on staff for 4 or 5 months out of the year?
I mean, my preference would be not to do that. We had full-time coaches in NFL Europe, and we use those guys in the off season. They'd come over to Europe. We'd have all kind of clinics in France and Germany and everywhere else, just to keep the brand alive. You wanted to be viable in any marketplace. I think the same thing is true, of the UFL. But again, it depends on resources. We did a lot of work, looking at NFL, practice squad rosters and who we thought might have an attraction to come over and play in our league. I mean, there's a lot of bodies going back and forth, and building a roster is not easy. It's a challenging task when you don't quite know who you have. And of course, it's not just about the quarterback and the star wideout, or a great running back. You've got to build, you need, 8, 9 strong offensive linemen with good experience. I mean, you got a lot of moving parts, and you need, I think, ultimately, at that point, a head coach. And keep in mind, our head coaches were basically our personnel guys, along with their assistant coaches. I think we had, if I remember correctly, we had head coaches on, full time. We had both coordinators on full time. We had some seasonal assistant coaches, but the head coaches and the coordinators, the full time guys, did all the personnel work in the off season. We did a lot of league level personnel work just to get folks into the league, into the pool. But there's a lot of work that happens in the off season, and I think you had asked what I was most proud of, and I said, the quality of the players, of the games coming out of the chute. That's in large part because we were able to identify the coaches were able to identify players along with league staff, and get those players distributed in a relatively fair fashion. Nobody was going to be dominant, but nobody was a dog, at least based on the first 5 weeks of play when we had to shut down. So all of that's connected. And again, I'll go back to a pretty simple point. You need money to do that. And if you don't have the money, it's going to be tough to sort of build that continuity in your local marketplaces, particularly given the checkered history of spring football in this country.
In terms of coaches being hired here, and I'm kind of trying to sum this down so it's not a half-hour question here, but when you led to hiring coaches, how much consideration was there for basically them being able to coach an exciting product, but also be able to assemble a team? Because we've seen some of these, and even in the championship game, and there's no whatever against Wade and AJ and everything else, but it wasn't great quality of play. So how important was it to kind of balance getting the right coaches, but also someone that can make an entertaining football product?
I spent a lot of time on coaches. I had a whiteboard in my office. We probably started with 100 potential coaching candidates and kind of worked our way down. The first coach that we announced, and we did this purposefully, was Bob Stoops in Dallas, and that was considered a real coup at the time. I've known Bob for years, known his family for years. He's a Youngstown guy. I'm a Cleveland guy. We could have been brothers in a different universe. But when he indicated to me that he was interested and willing to coach in the spring, and the reason for it, it wasn't that he was burnt out coaching. The guy loves football, lives football, but he wanted to take some time for the first time in his life to watch his son play football at Oklahoma. And his kid was a hell of a player. And, I said, Bob, I know exactly what you're saying because, I loved watching my kid play college football. And it's hard to have I was an athletic director at West Virginia at the time. I had my son playing out at Stanford, trying to get to my Mountaineer games that I needed to go to, as well as watch that's challenging. But when Bob said, I want to spend some time watching my son play, I want to go to games at Oklahoma and follow them on the road and just be a fan. You don't have tailgates and all that. I said, well, this is a perfect opportunity, Bob, to keep your toe in the water with the XFL. And he did. And of course, he's continued to do that, which is awesome. But that gave us a significant, bit of credibility as we were, working through all these things. And so, we wanted coaches who were offensive minded. Pep Hamilton, example, offensive coordinator for, major college teams, NFL. Trestman, Mark Trestman down in Tampa, same thing. So we wanted primarily, offensive minded coaches. We wanted guys who were sort of flexible because, having run NFL Europe, I knew the challenges that come up when you go into the first season ever for a league. There's going to be things that don't work out. There's going to be screw ups. There's going to be whatever, right? Logistics. I think we did a pretty good job, and I give a lot of credit to our staff. But there are still things that go south. And so we wanted to make sure we had guys who were willing to roll with the punches. Quite honestly, Kevin Gilbride up in New York, he had been he's an offensive guy and had been in situations like this before. So all these folks, not all of them, but many of them had experience previously with with some of the leagues. And we wanted folks that, bought into the concept and said, listen, we're going to do some things differently, like the kickoff, like the headset communication, but I think at the end of the day, I would say it was a pretty good group of head coaches. They were fun to work with when we got together. They were, gung ho about and excited about, the kickoff and headset communication, some of the other playing rules. They liked the idea of developing players. They brought great insight into what we were trying to do. And I had, previously over at NFL Europe, hired all the head coaches over there, guys like Jack Bicknell or Galen Hall or Al Luganbill, all successful, mostly college coaches. And here we had a little bit of a mixed group of both, college guys as well as pro guys, which I think was fun too. In many cases, our game resembled the college game a little bit more than it resembled because it's easier to get, a roster assembled in year one, with, for example, quarterbacks who've had success at the college level, but maybe not at the NFL level. And there's a big step up, right? So I think all in all, we had a pretty good group. We wanted legitimate coaches that had been around the block many times. And I think if you looked across the league, from Jim Zorn down to Tressman, all these other folks, I think we did a fairly solid job.
I got 3 more must asks here. I appreciate your time. You've been very, very nice with everything today. So I appreciate that. If you're cool with 3 more I got stars on these. I got to make sure we get to. In terms of, I guess we'll go to this. Speaking of college, with the the House versus NCAA and all of that, players making money in college here coming out. Are you concerned there would be a time where a player's making so much money in college, maybe they wouldn't be incentivized to go to one of these spring leagues, or they're going to have to compete against that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it was interesting. We believed at the time, you have to go back to 2018. This is before the NIL universe was put in place. We believe we had an opportunity to poach a handful of players from the college level who weren't NFL draft eligible. And we had a test case, and I should remember his name because he was a West Virginia Mountaineer. But we had a player at WVU. He had been suspended for his 3rd collegiate season because of some academic issue. And we reached out to him. He grew up in Pittsburgh. Very good defense, I think all Big 12 defensive back. And we brought him into the league, and that was sort of a test case for us because, he was not NFL draft eligible. He didn't really have anywhere else to go. I think we jacked up his salary a little bit. He was drafted by or assigned to, I forget, to the St. Louis team and played well. The entire season was a starter. I think was all whatever XFL after the 5th week. But we thought that was a real opportunity for guys, and this is again all pre-NIL world, for guys in college who weren't yet draft eligible for whatever reason, to come into the league and play for a season and make 60 grand, 75 grand, 100 grand, whatever the number would be. So that completely changed with NIL. It's hard to say how the NIL universe in the collegiate world, and now the House settlement and $21.6 million being made available by universities to, at least at the Power 4 level, to pay their players. Let's be honest with exactly what it is. And I would argue at the end of the day, we'll probably see something like, who knows, 75% of that go to the football players, just like the back pay is 75% geared towards football players. So hard to say how that's going to play out. There's obviously a lot more money in the collegiate game. Really good players might decide to spend another year in college. They might, the preference might be to redshirt freshman year, play 3 years, then you do a grad transfer thing. I mean, it's hard to say how it plays out. There's still a limited number of spots on an NFL roster. That won't change at all. So there's still going to be players that are out of college that don't have any collegiate eligibility left that still need to play. So I think fundamentally the spring league concept is still valid. and it will still be a pretty good stepping stone into the NFL. But it may be difficult, quite honestly, to get a guy like Cardale Jones, to come into the league. It's hard to say that has to play out, but certainly there's much more money at the collegiate level now with NIL and the house settlement and the way this is all going to play out, and that's going to have an effect in some form or fashion on spring football and the type of player that can come in. The other thing that people have to consider, there's a limited lifespan for professional football players. I mean, it takes a toll, on your body. Certainly positions like running back, linebacker, where you're just constantly, getting physical contact. So you have to sort of play out how many years you really have. How many years can your body hold up? Where's the best place to maximize your financial value, in this new universe? Collegiate, right? There's value in playing there. There's going to be some value in playing in the XFL or the UFL now, for a year or 2 years or 3 years. Obviously, the NFL is the king of the hill. The salary cap in the NFL is going up, dramatically, which is great for the players. So there's going to be, some strategy that I think players have to start thinking about, and they got to start thinking about that probably, year 1, 2 in college, and understand where they fit into the overall scheme of things. There's star players, right? Their first, second, third round draft choices are great star players, but then there's a whole bunch of rank and file guys, and they've got to, play this game, better than anybody, I think, now, to make sure they're maximizing the value, the value of time that their body has to compete in a pretty rough game. It's getting, there's great progress made in safety, but I think the game's rougher than it's ever been, just because the athletes are bigger, faster, stronger.
Last two here. Anything you've learned from college and kind of navigating that in the recent time, like at SMU, that you would kind of carry back into building the spring league now? Anything you've learned in the last few years?
Well, my experience outside of the specific football side, I mean, over in Europe for 10 years, I spent more time, on the business side of building NFL Europe, what was the World League of American Football, and then NFL Europe. I started with the Frankfurt Galaxy, and then moved up to the Rhine Fire, and then basically spent a lot of time on the business side, because that was as important, if not more important, quite honestly, than the football side. I spent most of my time in the XFL on the football side. We had a business group, but I worked with our business team, to develop season ticket sales plans and all the marketing and promotion, et cetera. So, the one thing I've learned is college football it's really remarkable when we think about it. It has a cult-like status among people, right? And it's all irrational. I went to college at West Virginia University. I love the Mountaineers. There's no rational reason why I should. I went to school there for 4 years. Big deal. I took some classes. I love the Mountaineers, right? And it's the same way for tens of millions of people across the country. That's a little bit different than the NFL avidity, or the NBA avidity. It's professional sports. Players come and go. Yeah, you root for your hometown team and you're passionate. But, the passion, the depth of the passion at the collegiate level is different. It's deeper. It's stronger. It's more alive in many cases. And it resembles European soccer passion, right? It resembles, how the European soccer system was developed, really beginning in the late 1800s into the early 1900s, and then, the post-war explosion in European soccer. So I say this to say, both over at NFL Europe, obviously we were in Europe, but even with the XFL, we tried to really sort of develop the fan avidity around these 8 teams that we had, really as a sort of collegiate type of a thing, right? Where, there was just a deeper passion, and that takes a while. You can't do that overnight, but there's, we hosted, happy hours, right? For brand new fans. We had head coaches there. They'd come. I was there at some of these things. They'd come over and we'd have a happy hour, and you just sort of build and build and build. And we didn't have anywhere near enough time to see the results of that, because the season was shut down after 5 weeks. But we were beginning to see DC, Seattle were both great examples. We were beginning to see people really saying, "Hey, I care about this team as much as I care about the University of Maryland, or about back then the Redskins, or now the Commanders." Right? They're people were quickly sort of, getting, "Oh, this is fun going to the games. We get the beer snake, and there's lots of young people here. I kind of like this. This is a small little 22,000 seat stadium or whatever it was down in." In Audi Field. This is a blast. And, these guys, they're playing pretty hard, they're not making that much money, but, I like this. This is fun. It's something to do in this. Right? So we were beginning to get that. And that's a lesson that I took from, being around college football as a player, being over in Europe, prior to my duty with the NFL. My wife and I lived over there. I was working, for a law firm, in understanding European soccer and how it's structured, and sort of developing that stickiness with your fan base. And I think we had that in our XFL version back in 2020. We had that certainly in St. Louis and Seattle and DC. We had that in Houston. And people love the fact that we sort of riffed off the old Oilers, and that I was an old Oiler, and people miss the old Oilers, all that sort of nostalgia. We didn't have enough time to really develop that at all in New York. It's such a different market. That was challenging. We just started in Tampa a little bit. It was probably not the right Florida city, in a sense, or I should say the right stadium. It was, NFL Buck Stadium, so big. But we were getting there in some of the markets. We were just starting to see that in LA a little bit, with that team and Winston Moss, the head coach, who was a real character.
Yeah.
But that's one of the lessons that I learned. When you're building these things, you sort of have to build it somewhat like you'd build or promote, a college team, because you've got to sort of create that avidity, but you got to supercharge it, right? You got to really accelerate it.
Yeah, you look though, at some of the teams that you wanted to say maybe struggled with attendance back in 2020, a little bit better than some of the ones now. So I mean, it's all in perspective when you look at that kind of stuff.
Well, I would say Dallas did okay. Arlington, but Dallas did fine. Houston, I thought, did fine. St. Louis knocked it out of the park. DC knocked it out of the park. Tampa struggled. LA did okay. New York was a real problem. It's just, you've got to spend so much money in that marketplace.
Yes.
And ultimately, in retrospect, we maybe should have considered playing over in Harrison, New Jersey, at the MLS building there, the Red Bull facility, which is very nice. I mean, there's some, I'm also no former MLS guy, right? So, I think there's some real value in these smaller venues, because you get the fan excitement. You're closing, a 20,000 seat stadium that's filled up. Witness, Audi Field for the DC team. A 20,000 seat stadium can be loud, and it can be raucous, and can be a hell of a lot of fun.
Last question for me, and just to curtail off that, talking about balancing, I guess, between building locally and then obviously the national TV broadcast. We see now, I would argue, we talk on the podcast, it's almost too much of a TV product, right? They say, okay, we want fans and we kind of run these giveaways, but we're not really doing the same work, right, that 2020 did. How did you guys balance that between, we want to obviously have the stadiums full, have passionate fan bases, but then obviously, the larger audience is always going to be on TV?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And it's you got to thread the needle, to a certain degree. I believe, though, that years 1, 2, 3, when there's a team playing, and I'm making this up, a team playing in Seattle, if it's good football, people tune in and say, "Oh, that was a hell of a throw, or it was a great catch, or that was a 62-yard field goal, or whatever." They don't care where that team is playing. They don't care if it's Seattle, if it's Portland, if it's Cabo, right? They want to see good football on television. So I think the TV viewership really is driven by the quality of the game, and recognizable coaches like Bob Stoops or Jim Zorn or whatever. I remember seeing Jim Zorn play. Now he's coaching this team. I'll watch for a couple series and see see if I like it, right? And maybe stick around. So I think for the vast majority of viewers, the 3.5, whatever million people that tuned in, week one to the old XFL in 2020, I don't think they cared where the games were actually taking place. They may not have even known. What they did care about was seeing a fan base in that stadium that was loud, that was, a bit raucous, and they didn't want to see, a whole swath of empty seats, right? So, the local fans were effectively the stage, if you will, and the good quality was important. So you had to focus on on getting local fans in there. We wanted 20,000 plus for every game in every market. We exceeded that in some markets, didn't get there in other markets, but that was really just sort of the trappings, if you will, that we wanted people on TV to see, because if you're a television viewer, at least I believe, if you're a television viewer and you see some good football, you also want to know that somebody in that local market cares and shows up, and wears a cap and a T-shirt and is there, waving a flag. And I remember, in Houston going to a couple of the Roughnecks games, and they're whatever at 19,000, 21,000, 23,000, and it looked good. Upper deck may have been sparsely populated, lower deck, pretty much jam packed. And, I think that helped the viewership, because people said, oh, this matters to people in Houston. And, oh, gosh, yeah, Texans, they love their football. I guess this must be important. I'll watch, I'll see what Kevin Gilbride does to try to break down the Houston defense, whatever. So they're two different things, but they are related. And it also, we had partners, obviously Fox, ESPN, and they obviously weighed in on where the franchises were. Ultimately, it was the league's decision, but you've got to get others on board as well. And you do want some geographical representation. I thought ultimately between Seattle and LA on the West Coast, we had our Midwestern, St. Louis team. We had two teams in Texas. You can never go wrong with football in Texas. And then we had obviously, East Coast. I thought it was pretty good. You had different time zones, all those sorts of things that matter. The only one that didn't perform really at all was New York, but that's also, I think, just a different market in a matter of time and money.
Yeah, I would argue with some of this in Seattle now that, I'll lament a little bit of the placement of the new UFL, and it's a lot of the Central and Eastern, but it is what it is.
I'll be honest, I am surprised why they didn't go to Seattle. It's a great football town. I mean, I've been to games, I've been to Seahawks games, seen my kid play out there. I've been to plenty of UW games when my son was at Stanford. The XFL team in Seattle, Sea Dragons. I mean, it's a great football town. It's remarkable. They people just love things that are Seattle. It's as good of a market as anywhere in the world. And I'm dead serious in saying this.
Well, even like we were just at the Mariner game last night. I mean, it was a sellout Friday night, 45,000 there. I said, man, that's like 8 Memphises here in the UFL. Don't tell anyone. But, I mean, Seattle shows up with Oliver, I have kept you for so long today. I so appreciate it. Kindness with your time. Our listeners, our viewers will so appreciate it. And you taking the time today really means a lot.
My pleasure. Thanks, Reed.
Huge special thanks to Oliver, as I said, spending extended time on his Saturday morning to sit down, help fill us in, listeners, viewers of the podcast. Huge special thanks to Sam Schwartzstein, friend of the show, getting that all set up. Really appreciate that. That was kind of a off the wall, like, hey, Sam, do you still talk with Oliver? What's going on? Oh, yeah, here you go. So ended up coming together easier than I thought, but I certainly appreciate that. No less work for Sam putting in, and obviously Oliver spending 50 plus minutes talking with me for the program. So really appreciate that. Like I said, this coming a few days early, kind of avoid the 4th of July traffic. So I hope you enjoy whether you're out of town, in town, traveling. Canada Day this week, my birthday. If you're a Canadian listeners, hope you had a great holiday that way. But that way you guys can kind of enjoy this. Hopefully it doesn't get buried in the YouTube algorithm. So that is what we have for today. Like I said, like and subscribe. Get us up over 4,000 subscribers. We'll be back. Might have a hiatus on the recorded, on the pre-recorded Friday shows. We'll see. Working on another big interview for next week with the holidays and travel. Might just have the Monday recaps with Hussey for the next week, with Jason Hussey over the Monday CFL recaps. But we keep you posted on that. Like and subscribe, click the bell, turn on notifications, all that stuff. We will see you next time. Truly hope you guys enjoy. Thought this was a really fun episode, really fun interview. So hope you agree. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.